Hello, everyone, and welcome back after a very long time. It's been a long since we spoke with all of you, and it's once again back with Surya only. I think we are now going to be more punctual about it, of course, as we move ahead. But yes, good to be back with all of you. And I once again welcome Surya to our podcast. As you all might know,
Hi,
yeah. Hi, how are you, Surya?
I'm good. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I am also fine. Fortunately, things are good at my end as well. But let's see how and where COVID is taking us as of now. It's a bit of a
Yeah,
inflection point as of now. Yeah.
true, true.
So as all of you might know, Surya is a law student, a final year law student, in fact, and an enthusiast about history, geopolitics, and all of those stuff which matter a lot as of now where we are sitting today. So this time we have something very, very interesting for all of you. Let me give a small context before I put down the first question for Surya to explain like what is happening. So recently, what is happening is there is a major conflict which is going to be erupting, and in fact, it has also started to a large extent between Russia and Ukraine. So the reason being, Ukraine was a former Soviet Union country, but recently it has shown its intention towards joining European Union, and to some extent also becoming a Western ally by becoming a part of NATO. Not formally yet, but yes, the intentions say so. In such a situation, Russia is in a very uncomfortable position because of obvious reasons that it's a very bordering nation and very close to Moscow. And once it becomes a part of NATO, which in and of itself an alliance led by USA, it becomes a very crucial thing for Russia. So, not to speak much, I believe it. I'll hand over to Surya once now that Surya, what is happening? Like, what are the reasons why it is getting so much of buzz as of now, and what is the recent news between Russia and Ukraine as of now?
So right now the situation is very precarious, to say the least. It is the eastern Ukraine, also known as the Donbas region, is currently under the control of Russian separatists. It is not under control of Ukraine, although it is technically part of Ukraine,
Mhm.
right? For those of you who have played FIFA or watched UEFA Champions League, you would have heard of a team called Shakhtar Donetsk. So Donetsk is one of the cities in eastern Ukraine which has informally seceded from Ukraine, other being Luhansk. And these two, the Luhansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic, these two cities, or well, regions, right, have informally seceded, as I said. And there is now a full-fledged proxy war that is going on between Russian separatists and the Ukrainian military and paramilitary groups armed by Ukraine. So this is something of like what is happening in Kashmir, where there is a line of control. Neither side actually recognizes it, and there's constant fighting along that line. And this situation is extremely dangerous. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of the misfortune that befell the Malaysian Airlines flight that was shot down by a Stinger missile. This happened over Ukraine, specifically eastern Ukraine.
Mhm.
And this is the current situation. This is very, very destabilizing as far as Europe is concerned.
Fair enough. It gives a brief understanding of what is happening as of now. But like, let's take a step back now, Surya, because whatever is happening today is actually getting affected by what happened yesterday, in a sense that it's deriving its link from the past. So let's deep dive into, if of course, if you could take us through some historical context about what is the exact reasons or what are the events because of which we are standing where we are standing today.
So we could go back to the year 2013, which is when a lot of this mess actually started. Of course, there were tensions between Ukraine and Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed, but it really, hit the fan when in 2013 the Ukrainian government went against its own popular mandate to join, EU and big better relations with the West. Excuse me. So this is what the people actually wanted, but the government said no, and this led to riots and protests. And following which, as I said, the Russian military and the Russian government began arming and supporting separatists in the eastern part of Ukraine, which contains a lot of ethnic Russians.
Hmm.
And in exchange, the Ukrainian government not only sent its own military, it also started arming paramilitary groups, like how Pakistan arms non-state actors, right? Same way. So they started arming them, and currently, as I said earlier, these two groups are engaged in fighting along a particular line drawn in the Donbass region. And there was a UN brokered peace, but that peace is only in name because it is currently a very unstable peace which has constant ceasefire violations regularly. The problem right now is that the Russian separatists in the eastern side of Ukraine, eastern part of Ukraine, that is, currently have access to Russian military technology from the border with Russia, and Russia has also promised to back them up in case of any potential conflict with Western Europe or NATO, right? Also, the thing is, Russia has also moved its own troops to the Ukrainian border, hundreds of thousands of troops and tanks, which Ukraine cannot hope to match in any way. So this is what has happened. In fact, one of the things that happened right after the mess in 2013 was a referendum in Crimea. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot of, all of you in school have read the poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade. This was the Crimean War, actually, where Russian troops slaughtered the British troops who were sent to the wrong battle. So this Crimean Peninsula was occupied by Russia in 2014. Despite being a part of Ukraine, it held a referendum which the West, held as illegal and rigged. But this did not stop Putin from walking in and taking over. And frankly, nobody was going to stop him. And once he took it over, of course, Russia was kicked out of the G8, which then became the G7 as you know it today. And Russia was sanctioned. So since then, tensions have only ever been rising. However, it must be noted that Ukraine is not a NATO country. So if there is a full-scale war, NATO is technically not obligated to do anything about it. Unlike other NATO countries, the NATO Charter, just to give you a brief example or a brief background, has something called Article 5, which says that an attack against one NATO member is an attack against all, and all NATO members will fight against you. So since Ukraine is not a member, it is very tricky for the West. How exactly do they respond to this aggression? Because Ukraine wants to be a European ally, a NATO ally, but is not a NATO ally yet. So this is where we currently are at, and it is very, very tense, to say the least.
Fair enough. Just a quick follow-up to this. What is NATO's stance as of now? Is it a softer stance towards Ukraine, given the primary anti-Soviet, anti-Russia vibes that NATO usually has?
So currently there is no NATO troops. So basically, just to give you a brief understanding, there's something called a Supreme Allied Commander. So once all the nations agree to Article 5, to invoke Article 5, all the troops that each nation has committed to NATO comes under the Supreme Allied Commander. The Supreme Allied Commander will then decide how to use NATO forces. But since as I said, Ukraine is not a part of NATO, there is no invocation of Article 5, as you cannot defend a non-member using that. So now what the US is doing, right, is primarily US-led initiative. They are promising and delivering to Ukraine more lethal aid, which the Trump administration first did, and now Biden is continuing to do. And they are also involved in very heavy diplomacy to try and diffuse this without resorting to conflict, because conflict will be very, very bad for everybody involved. So this is currently the situation now. NATO has not committed any troops, as I said, because it can't. But what it is being given in the form of informal aid by the US, and also I believe some military instructors for the Ukrainian military as well. This is what the situation is.
Makes a proper sense also. Yeah. So let's move to a next link of questions. The idea now, as we see, the major reason why this is happening is because it's about the western borders of Russia, and basically the primary reason being topography. So let's say for a quick example of India, India is today safe from a lot of other nations bordering it is because of the topography. Let's say Himalayas is separating us a lot from the nations like China over us. So similarly, I think topography is one of the major reasons because of which Russia is becoming paranoid. So majorly because a plain field existing between Ukraine and Russia. So what are your thoughts? Is it because of this topographical conditions that Russia is becoming a lot like more paranoid than it should be in such a situation?
Yes, you are right in that sense. Russia is paranoid about its western border because, just to give an example, if you look at the map of Russia, the European part is where the majority of its population lives. And that is to the west of something called the Ural Mountains. So the east of the Ural Mountains is where the majority of Russia is. That is the Asian part. Now this is whole of Siberia, and many people can't live here because it's very, very cold, inhospitable. In fact, two of the coldest cities on earth are in this region, where temperatures in winter can go to minus 68 degrees. So this is a place where people can't live. So most of the population lives in the west, right? And Russia cannot be invaded from any other way, not from the north, not from the east, and not from the south. The west is where Russia's real geographic problem arises. Because if you look at the topographical map of Europe, you will see that the north and central European parts are completely flat. There is no geographical features to prevent any Western European nation from invading Russia. Now, if you might think that okay, this is a little bit of a exaggeration, why would somebody do this? This has happened before. So two major instances, of course it happened many times over history, but two major instances. One was in 1812 when Napoleon, right, he was undisputed leader of Europe at the time. He used what is currently Poland and Lithuania, back then known as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, to invade Russia. He occupied Moscow, he occupied majority of the cities, but then of course the Russians practiced a scorched earth policy, because of which Napoleon's army didn't have any food or water, so they had to retreat and they were slaughtered on the way back. And more recently in 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, completely flat land again, nothing to stop them in between. It was a complete massacre of Soviet troops. So if you look at, as I said, coming back to the topographical map, the plains of Europe act as a funnel, right? What is the point of a funnel? A funnel is to just ensure that something goes into the other side very easily. So invading armies use the North European plain as a funnel. Now, back when the Soviet Union existed, not only did the Soviet Union exist, there was something called a Warsaw Pact country. Okay, so just like NATO, the Soviet Union, in fact, interestingly asked the Americans if they could join NATO, but the Americans said no. After which the Soviets decided to set up the Warsaw Pact in 1954. So, what is the Warsaw Pact? Well, it was a pact made in Warsaw, currently the capital of Poland, where all the East European countries, basically Soviet puppet states, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania, said that invading even one of these countries would be invading all of them, just like NATO. Right? Just like Article 5 of NATO. So if you look at the current Warsaw Pact countries, the Warsaw Pact no longer exists. But if you look at the countries now, you will see just how far behind NATO troops were from Moscow. The distance between Moscow and NATO troops was absolutely, it was very, very large, because the NATO troops were only based in West Germany. Like the closest point, because Austria was neutral, the closest point was West Germany. And West Germany was very, very far away from Moscow. But now, after the Soviet Union collapsed, neither does the Warsaw Pact exist, nor do any of the countries, in the former Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. Now, Belarus, the Baltic states, as Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and then South Ukraine, Georgia. Now, all of these countries are no longer part of the Warsaw Pact. So there is nothing actually stopping a Western European country from being at the doorstep of Moscow. This is the current problem that Russia faces. Okay, and Russia's fears are not dumbfounded as well, because currently Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, also known as the Baltic countries, because they border the Baltic Sea, are NATO members. They're full-fledged NATO members. So if Russia, invades any of these countries, it is like invading all NATO countries, and it will invite a full-scale response from NATO. Down south, Belarus is a Russian, essentially a Russian puppet state. Alexander Lukashenko, I'm sure you've heard of him. That is not a geographical problem for Russia because of the political climate, which favors Russia. But down south in Ukraine is another issue for Russia. It currently does not have a border problem, but it would if the plan of NATO of Ukraine went through in joining NATO. That would have a large amount of not only Ukrainian troops, but a full NATO force along with air assets and ballistic missile defense systems stationed in eastern Ukraine, very very close to Moscow. Now this, as you can see, is very clearly a problem for Russia, and they have resorted to, well, if I might use the word bullying before, to keep these countries from going away. And one may well argue that the situation in eastern Ukraine, the destabilization that has happened there, is a result of Russian efforts, because they do not want at any cost to have another country that borders Russia joining NATO, because that would bring NATO forces ever closer to Moscow.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair.
That is currently the situation. Yeah.
Makes sense. So I think there's also one thing that we should understand is to learn from what happened in past. So one of the instances which one can recall here is something which happened in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the crisis which almost brought an end to world, though an exaggeration, but yes, it was something as close as it gets. So I think it would be better for you to explain like what happened at that point and how should one actually draw links and lessons from that instance to what is happening today.
So yes, you rightly pointed out the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was, by the way, no exaggeration when I mean the world almost ended, because I'll put it very briefly. In 1962, on October 14th, U.S. spy planes spotted something over Cuba. Cuba, as you know, in 1959 was taken over by communist revolution, and Fidel Castro led it and he occupied it. Now, this immediately became an enemy of the US. So what happened was that there were a lot of medium range missiles in the Soviet Union which could not reach the US. But what happened was, once Castro took over, he told the Soviet Union, he made an alliance with them, because both being communist nations. He said, why don't you put your medium range nuclear missiles on Cuban soil? So the Americans did not discover this for a few months until they finally did, because they saw the missile batteries in their spy planes, and they suddenly realized that the whole of the continental US is now in range of Soviet nuclear missiles, very very close by. Washington, New York, all the major cities. So obviously the Americans freaked out, saying we can't have Soviet nuclear missiles so close to America. So what they did back then was something called a quarantine. They did not obviously call it a war, they call it a quarantine, which basically meant the US Navy blockaded Cuba and said any Soviet ship will be stopped and searched, and if you refuse to comply, it will be sunk.
Okay.
So some ships, obviously, most of the ships heeded to this and went back because they didn't want to be sunk. But there were not only ships there were some submarines as well. These being Russian nuclear submarines. One of the submarines actually mistook a blast a blast or some noise, thinking that war had begun, and actually pressed the button for the missile. So there were 3 officers who needed to press the button. 2 did, and the 3rd guy, the senior officer in command, did not press it, because he said, okay, there is no way a nuclear war could have started. So that actually saved the world, because if the 3rd officer had pressed the button, it would have been nuclear war, and of course the end of humanity as we know it. So after it went to this level, both leaders decided, okay, this is getting very very hot, this is not sustainable, so we need to do something and calm things down. So what America did was, okay, they reached out to the Soviet Union and they said, okay, you pull out your missiles from Cuba, and in return, in secret of course, we will pull our missiles out of Turkey. Turkey, as you know, borders what is currently Georgia today, and Georgia was a Soviet Union country. So America, as you see, violently reacted, or I mean, I would not say violently, but took the threat of a Soviet nuclear missile so close to its home very, very seriously, and actively, got these missiles away from American homeland. So then the flip question is, why is what Russia doing seen as overreaction? Because any NATO country, any Ukrainian, or I mean, any attempt by Ukraine to join NATO and actually being successful would mean that American nuclear missiles could be based in Ukraine, a stone's throw away from Russia, right? So why is the Russian? Why would some people say that Russia is overreacting? That is of course left to each one's opinion. I am not here to give my opinion, but this is the question that Russia is also asking. And another thing that one should understand right now is Russia has given some pretty ridiculous demands to NATO, saying you have to pull your missiles out of so many countries, and a whole host of demands they have given, which are practically, for all practical purposes, not going to happen. The West is going to say no, because they also have to look strong. So, and Putin probably knows this. So the only thing that one can infer is that he has given such ridiculous demands in order to be rejected, so that he can use it as a pretext to invade.
Okay, makes sense.
Right. So this is the thinking of a lot of people. That might not be the case as well. You never know what actually the case is, but this is what it appears to be. And the lessons that we can, as you said, which we can draw from the Cuban Missile Crisis is, I think, the direct hotline communication between the two leaders is the most important thing, because it's ultimately comes down to a matter of trust. Trust that the Russians will not invade Western Europe, and consequently America will not use Eastern European countries to invade Russia. Back then, the hotline was directly between President Kennedy and President Nikita Khrushchev, and both of them spoke it out directly and sorted the matter out multiple times. Not just that, but many whatever issues that occurred. So I think that is one thing that the world can definitely learn in whichever conflict zone, not just Ukraine, but this is something that I believe is happening because, as you know, there was a summit between Biden and Putin recently, which was a confidence building measure. But I would still say that it's still extremely, extremely tense, and this crisis is not going to go away anytime soon, and hopefully cooler heads prevail.
Makes sense. It's been a very wonderful dive in to understand the whole context in such a depth, and to also understand the historical reasons because of which where we are standing today. But being Indians, I think we cannot conclude this video by not talking about what is this going to mean for India. So let me put it down for you in a manner that our audience can also understand. So where we are standing today, as of now, India is trying to balance its diplomacy as best as it can get. So a quick example could be between Israel and Palestine. It tries to sort of balance it out as good as it gets without sort of making any country offended about it. The same also goes for where we are standing today in terms of Russia as well as USA. Although we are a natural ally of USA, but let's say we still have a softer stance when it comes to getting our defense equipments like S-400, if I am not wrong. If these are the missiles that we have got from Russia recently. But I think there's something also known as CASTSA that you will explain about. But from what I understand, let's say if something like this happens where Ukraine goes into NATO and there's a sort of softer conflict or a cold conflict that starts between Russia and NATO, in such a situation, if India happens to have a softer stance for NATO, or a softer stance for Russia, it would become very crucial for us and our relations with USA in that situation. So what is it, and what are your thoughts in where we are standing today, and how could this pan out in a larger sense?
Okay, so CATSA, yes, it is a very important topic that we must discuss as Indians, because in 2017, just to give you some context, the US Congress passed something known as the Countering of American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. That's what CATSA stands for, CAATSA. So this basically gives the President of the United States power to
Hmm.
sanction any country or any company within any country that does business with America's enemies. Now, America's enemies basically means North Korea, Iran, well, Syria, and Russia as well.
Hmm.
So now, currently, India has good relations with the Ukraine
Hmm.
and with Russia. You saw President Putin had just come for a brief visit a couple of weeks back.
True.
And when Prime Minister Modi went to the the COP summit in Scotland,
Hmm.
he met the Ukrainian president, promising to visit.
Hmm.
So, as you can see, it is a delicate effort at balancing relations
Hmm.
between Russia and the West.
Hmm.
So now, as you rightfully said, S-400, the widely touted as the world's most advanced missile defense system,
Hmm.
India has currently bought it in our interest because we have two nuclear armed neighbors who are not above using their missiles against us. So we need these missiles.
Hmm.
And we have resisted American pressure to almost to the extent of saying, you do whatever you want. We are going to get this because we need it. And rightfully so, because we are looking out for our interests.
Hmm.
But it is understood that the US president, sorry, will give us a waiver. So this CATSA Act
Hmm.
gives permission to the US president to waive sanctions. So he has the option of imposing sanctions. He also has the option of giving a waiver,
Hmm. Hmm.
which means that, okay, you know what? Do it. We will not sanction you. Now, this is going to be a case to case basis.
Yeah, of course.
So currently, it is expected that India will get a waiver because America is trying to focus more on its issues with China.
Hmm.
And for that, America should not ruin its relations with India because India is going to be a very important ally in this fight.
Hmm.
But if a war breaks out, a full-fledged war breaks out between Russia and Ukraine and Russia and the West, that is,
Hmm.
the US president and the US Congress might not be as forgiving.
Hmm.
So if we continue to buy Russian military equipment,
Hmm. Hmm.
the Americans might well sanction Indian companies and not allow them to work in the US. And US sanctions have a whole host of problems. So Indian companies having assets in America or American controlled territories or American allied nations, the US president will have power to sanction that, and we will not have access to it. And Indian companies might even be cut out from the American market. So this is something we definitely do not want.
Of course.
Right? Now, for example, say Mahindra is doing business in Russia and Mahindra is doing business in America. They are.
Hmm.
This act would allow the US president to sanction Mahindra.
Hmm.
It can specifically sanction companies now. How wide that power is, we'll have to see because it's a new legislation. But when it comes to countering Russia, the US will not stop at anything.
Hmm.
So this is something that we must, keep in mind. I think our national security advisor and our foreign minister and of course the government as a whole are focusing on this. I think the our diplomacy with the Washington based establishment and with the Russian establishment, is much better.
Hmm.
I think, of course, this is very far fetched. This is my opinion that India can act as a bridge between the two countries because any other country does not have the unique position that India has. Because Western countries cannot act as an arbiter between US and Russia, and neither can China. Because of course China and America are enemies. But I think India is poised to is in a perfect position to be a sort of peacemaker, a sort of someone who can bring both sides to the table. Frankly, because of the good relations that India shares with both countries. So I think this is very wishful thinking, but if I were, if I could decide what would happen, I would probably try and do that, and which is probably what is happening behind the scenes, which we don't know about. But if there is a war, of course, once there's a war, all bets are off. You don't know which way it's going to go. So I think the efforts that the Indian government, the Americans, and the Russians are, the effort that they're putting in are to prevent a conflict. Because slightly misread intentions could lead to another Cuban Missile Crisis again. So these things, I'm guessing, are actively trying to be avoided. But I mean, we'll have to see where the chips fall. It is recently brewing. It is becoming worse. So this, we'll have to take a look as things go by. But this is definitely one of the most severe and most what do you say, potential flashpoints in the world right now. The other being the Taiwan Strait.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, let's wait and watch, and let's hope for the best.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Surya. Like, this was a very insightful discussion. Of course, I think from where we are ending today, maybe we can start with the next discussion on Taiwan Strait in the next video to understand about the whole issue as we record a
Absolutely,
new video in
absolutely.
coming times. Okay, so on this note, I think I'd like to thank you on a formal note for taking out time to speak on such an important issue. In fact, I was also not aware of how important this issue was, because on a broader sense, one feels like conflicts are happening almost every day at every point of time, so it
Yeah,
becomes
yeah,
indifferent in a sense like that. But when you
yeah.
hold it, when you pan it down in a manner, and when you zoom it down in a lens that you brought us to, it became very clear and concise and crisp for us to understand how important this issue was. So thank you very much, Surya, and I hope you stay in good health and take care of yourself in the coming days.
You too, Sandesh.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.